I was watching YouTube videos, and the more videos I watched, the more interesting recommendations I got, and I kept watching, and it went on and on in a vicious circle. Those also occur in interpersonal relationships, and thanks to Friedemann Schulz von Thun, we know how they work. And today I will tell you about that. Welcome to the Soft Skill channel. My name is Sebastian Jung, and today I would like to present to you Schulz von Thun's vicious circle. Some of you have encountered them before in my video about Schulz von Thun's styles of communication, where we used them. In the video description I will list all the books they appear in, those I know of, in the section Literature and Sources. However, as I mentioned before, unfortunately those are not available in English. There is this small booklet, 6 Tools for Clear Communication, that is available from the Schulz von Thun Institute. It is self-published, therefore it is rather expensive, unfortunately, and you can only get it directly from the Schulz von Thun Institute. I will provide a link in the video description. So, what constitutes a vicious circle? Let's have a look at one. This is similar to what children do when they go on like, you are stupid, now you are stupid, you are way more stupid, and so on. We also do this as adults, and we are perfectly serious about it. We have two people or two parties who interact in this vicious circle, and for each of them we have the inner experience of the situation, the feelings they have in this interaction. This is displayed in the round shapes, and we have the outward behavior they show toward the other person, which is displayed at the top and bottom. Now, person A feels hurt and attacked due to the behavior of person B, so he reacts accordingly by disparaging and attacking person B, who in turn feels attacked and hurt and reacts accordingly, and so on. The circle goes on and on. Both person A and person B view their behavior as a mere reaction to the other person's behavior. They don't see the vicious circle itself. Here we have a symmetrical vicious circle, where both participants are in a similar position and show similar behavior. The other variation would be a complementary vicious circle, where both people show different behavior and or are in different positions, and they complement each other. Schulz von Thun provides a nice example for that with the employee Miss Speak Up and her superior Mr. New Boss. This is the situation from Miss Speak Up's point of view. Her new superior always acts arrogant and bossy towards her, thus she feels not acknowledged in her efforts and her contributions, and she feels degraded. She reacts accordingly by holding her ground and by being assertive and brave. Schulz von Thun says we view our own behavior in the positive light of good intentions. Of course, she means well by being assertive and brave and holding her ground, because this is perfectly justified for her, so she views her own behavior in a positive way. On the other hand, Mr. New Boss' behavior she views in the negative light of the unpleasant results, because his behavior makes her feel degraded and unacknowledged, so she views it in a negative way as being arrogant and bossy. We have a question mark here for Mr. New Boss feelings and inner experience, and this is because Miss Speak Up obviously doesn't know how he feels and where his behavior is coming from. Now what we usually do is we fill this void with our personal interpretation. And in such a situation, the interpretation tends to be negative. For example, Miss Speak Up might say, oh, he is probably afraid of strong women and he is actually rather weak in this leadership position. He's not fit to be a leader and, and to hide his insecurities, he acts arrogant and bossy. The vicious circle might gain additional momentum due to what Schulz von Thun calls an additional engine. This occurs if the other person's behavior touches an old wound, if it resembles unpleasant earlier experiences. So, for example, let's say Miss Speak Up had unpleasant experiences in her past, maybe even in her childhood, where she felt degraded and unacknowledged by people who acted in an arrogant and bossy way, maybe her father, maybe previous boyfriend, doesn't matter. So she has negative previous experiences, and when she experiences this behavior of Mr. New Boss, she is reminded of those previous experiences and she reacts stronger to this behavior than is actually appropriate for this situation, because she doesn't just react to the situation at hand, but also to the negative previous situations she had experienced. Let's have a look at the situation from Mr. New Boss' point of view. Again, he views the other party's behavior in the negative light of the bad results. He says, because Miss Speak Up is so touchy and stubborn, I feel not acknowledged as superior and I feel indignant. And I react accordingly in a perfectly justified way. He views his own behavior in the positive light of good intentions. He says, I have to push back and I have to restrain her. And again, he doesn't know how Miss Speak Up feels and where her behavior is coming from, so he adds his own negative interpretation. He says, oh, she probably has an inferiority complex, that's why she has to show off in this way. So, how can we get out of such a vicious circle? What can the participants do to get out of it? As I mentioned before, both view their own behavior as mere reactions to the other party's behavior. They are not aware of the vicious circle. However, even if they become aware, this won't solve the situation. The participants might probably say, oh well, now that we know how this works, we will just stop doing that, but unfortunately it's not that easy. A good first step is to improve communication, because if any communication happens at all, it will be, let's call it vertical communication, where both parties refer to the behavior. So Miss Speak Up might say, because you act in such an arrogant and bossy way, I have to hold my ground and be assertive and brave and fight back. And Mr. New Boss might say, no, it's entirely different because you are so touchy and stubborn, I have to push back and restrain you. And the next step, a better alternative, would be to practice, let's call it horizontal communication, where they both refer to their feelings, to the reasons for their behavior. So Miss Speak Up might say, because of how you treat me, I feel degraded and I feel that my efforts and contributions are not acknowledged. And Mr. New Boss might say, because of your behavior, I feel not acknowledged as your superior and I feel indignant. And this is where my behavior is coming from. Furthermore, each participant can work at each of those 4 stations to make an improvement, to make a difference. Let's stick to Mr. New Boss' point of view and start with the behavior of Miss Speak Up. He experiences this behavior in an entirely negative way as being touchy and stubborn. So a good first step here would be to ask himself, what positive aspects are there in this behavior? And to do that, he can use Schulz von Thun's square of development that I showed you before in another video, because a basic idea of the square is that negative behavior is actually an exaggerated form of a good kind of behavior. So Mr. New Boss would ask himself, what is the good aspect behind this touchy and stubborn behavior? Now, if he can't think of anything, an easier first step would be to ask, what is the positive behavior I would rather have instead of this stubborn, touchy thing? And this might be compliance, where she says, yeah, I don't really like it, but I am compliant with your decisions and I am compliant with your role as superior. Next, he would ask himself, what would be the negative exaggeration of this? And this might be a behavior that is smiles at the front and knives at the back, where she seems to comply to everything and seems to agree to everything, but actually she never voices her true opinions. She might speak badly about him behind his back, but she will never say anything to his face. And then, final step, what would be the positive counterpart of that? That would be someone who openly voices his opinion, who is honest about his contradiction to something. And this is the positive aspect he could find behind what he experiences as touchy and stubborn. And if he recognizes this and acknowledges this, then it might change his own behavior and in turn might even change the other party's behavior. Next, we have the feeling and inner experience of Mr. New Boss. Here it is important for him to take responsibility for those feelings, because Miss Speak Up might trigger those feelings, but she doesn't cause them. Those are his own feelings that are created within himself, and he has to take responsibility for them. And once he does that, he might ask himself, do I have other options available here? Could I emotionally react in a different way to this behavior? Next, we have his own behavior. There it is important to disconnect stimulus and response, because probably his behavior up to now has been kind of automatic. I feel not acknowledged as superior, and automatically I react by pushing back and by restraining her. Now, the important thing here would be to stop this automatic response after the stimulus and to consciously make a decision. Now that she has behaved like this, and this has caused these feelings within me, how do I want to react to the situation? What would be appropriate? What would help to make an improvement to the situation? And finally, we have the other parties' feelings and inner experience that are unknown but filled with a negative interpretation. First step here would be to discard that negative interpretation and again become aware that you just don't know how the other person is feeling and where her behavior is coming from. And next step would be to figure out what those feelings are and what the reasons for the behavior are, which can be achieved by talking to her, as I mentioned before, horizontal communication. And finally, if you actually know, if you know what the other party's feelings and reasons are, it is very important to accept them as they are. Never try to talk another person out of his or her feelings. That won't work. And don't judge or devalue them, just accept them as they are. These steps, these approaches can help you to slow down and to get out of a vicious circle and to improve the situation. Now, finally, I would like to show you a situation where this gets a step more complex, where things are a bit more complicated. Schulz von Thun recommends to always ask, what benefit are both parties getting out of this vicious circle? Because at first glance it might seem like both participants are caught in an unpleasant, vicious circle that is unpleasant for both of them and doesn't hold any benefits for anyone. But often there is some hidden unconscious need that makes the participants wish for the circle going on and on. Here Schulz von Thun gives an example that he encountered in his own practice of a son and a father. And the father has been divorced and the son is living with his grandparents, and the son is frequently committing wrongdoings. He does some shoplifting or smash windows, things like that. And then the grandparents tell the father, and he is shocked and alarmed, and he appears and is strict and stigmatizes the son. He tells him, if you behave like this, you will become a criminal. And the son feels rejected and he feels labeled as a criminal, and he behaves accordingly by committing more wrongdoings. And at first glance, this vicious circle is entirely unpleasant for both parties and doesn't hold any benefits for anyone. However, after further analysis, it turned out that there is an additional dynamic, that this rather obvious first vicious circle contains a second hidden inner vicious circle. Because each time the father was called upon because of his son's wrongdoings, he was needed as a father. He had an opportunity to take on this role of father that he usually didn't experience anymore because of the divorce. And for the son, each time the father came because of his wrongdoings and punished him and stigmatized him. Even though this was an unpleasant experience, it was still a father-son experience and an experience of togetherness. So, both the father and the son had some hidden unconscious need for the vicious circle to go on and for the vicious circle to continue, because it fulfilled some need of them they weren't aware of. So you can see the vicious circle can be rather complex, rather complicated, can be more than meets the eye at first glance, and that's why I find them quite interesting and fascinating, and I wanted to talk about them in a bit more detail. Have you ever been caught in a vicious circle? Let me know about your experiences in the comments. I'm looking forward to your feedback. If you enjoyed the video, I would be quite happy to receive a like from you. And if you haven't done so before, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos. I would be quite happy to have you as a subscriber. We will see each other next week with the book review of Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. For today, I'll take my leave. Have a nice day. See you next time.